Okay. How's everybody doing? Everybody doing okay? Hanging in there? Good. Okay, so just to start this off, again, this is International University of the East. If you've forgotten your school since you don't come, I found out some students were not even checking their emails for weeks, and then I'm enrolled in a class. I have to do something? Yes. So this is the year 2020, spring quarter. Okay. Today's the fifth week. And this is the morning class, if we were at school. Monday mornings, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. HIS 101 is the school code. And this is United States history through 1876. And again, we're on week 5. Okay. So week 5 is also, you're going to be sent a exam, the midterm. That'll be sent to you by the office. So have to make sure the office has a copy of it for themselves. It's very important for record keeping. So you'll do the lecture today. This will not be on the exam. This will be towards the final. The ones we did prior, that'll be on the midterm, okay? So let me start today's lecture, and we're gonna talk about the beginnings and then go through the steps of the American Revolution against who? Mexico? Korea? No, Britain. England. Okay, so I've got the schedule out of the way. So let me go to the PowerPoint. Okay, we sat there. I put my face off in the corner so you don't have to look at that. Just look at your material and I'll go through it for you, okay? So revolution reigns. We've gone over this word before, reigns. It just means it's the thing that's going over. It's, we could say like a kingdom, but at this point it's just saying this is the most prominent thing that is happening. We could say right now, to make it modern, we could say the pandemic reigns right now. It's the most dominant thing in the society right now. So at this time, in this situation, revolution was the most dominant. It was reigning in the colonies at the time. Although many of the dictates set forth by Great Britain on the American colonies served as a prelude to war, there's some debate as to which issues were the most pressing. Okay, just a few little the dictates. Dictates are the schedule of things and what is set forth is how they go step by step. And served as a prelude to war. Anything that's a prelude, means it comes before. So there were certain steps and situations that happened before the war that caused it to happen. And then it says there's some debate as to which issues were the most pressing. Pressing meaning the most urgent or the most important. It's Old English now. I mean, I'd probably hear an older person saying, but if I ran into an old friend and I saw her and I said, hey, how you doing? You want to go have coffee and talk about old times? And she tells me, I have a pressing date at the moment, which means it's kind of not bothering her, but it's what she has to do right now. That's what's pressing, okay? All right, certainly the signers of the Declaration of Independence insisted it was about liberty and democracy. Yet some modern historians argue that the revolution was fought for money and trade. So two different situations there, two different beliefs. Indeed, all of these concerns probably had something to contribute to the revolt, meaning revolution, which had most likely given King George more than a few sleepless nights. Okay. So there we go, already dividing issues. The Continental Army, and that would be the army of the colonists. Upon his appointment as commander of the colonial forces, General Washington organized militia companies. Because he had fought alongside the British in the French and Indian War, he knew that the contempt the British military showed for colonial officers. It didn't hurt that as a Virginian, he might bind the southern colonies to the New England Patriots. And that's not the football team, okay? That the football team was named after them. If there was to be victory, Washington knew it would take all 13 colonies working together. So not one, not two, not nine, but all 13 had to get together to fight against the powerful country of England. If you're not sure what a militia is, on the very top there, it's an army made up of citizens. There was no colonial army. The British ruled it, and they didn't allow the regular folks there from there later to become Americans do most things. So this had to be built up an army. It's like you could build a militia here now from the friends on your street, right? The K-Town militia, right, from your neighborhood. And they said he knew the contempt the British military showed for colonial officers. So contempt means like disrespect, no respect for the other people. Okay. Battles were already underway when Washington appeared at the Second Continental Congress in May 1775, dressed in his uniform of the Fairfax County Militia. So like the Fairfax Street over here, right, passing Larchmont. On June 25th, 1775, Washington set out for Massachusetts, and for all my students who can't say it, you can just say Massachusetts, okay, to take command of the forces. Under great adversity, Washington took what's more or less an armed mob and assembled it into the Continental Army with one goal: victory. Okay, mob. Sometimes you get a lot of people protesting something, and there's 200-300 people, and they're angry and yelling. They call usually that a mob because it's not organized for fighting or like an army. So it's just an armed mob, which means they had arms. But he assembled this mob into an actual Continental Army. At first, Washington found his new army to be in good spirits, as it had inflicted heavy casualties on the British at Bunker Hill. And don't forget, we have a Bunker Hill in downtown LA. However, the general was appalled. Appalled is another way of saying shocked, but in a really negative way. Because shocked, you can't be shocked in a positive way. A woman can get an engagement ring, but appalled is like shocked and disgusted at the same time. Okay. He was appalled by their lack of discipline. What's more, many of the men would end their military service. Just checking here. Soon. So Washington faced the triple challenge of recruiting, training, and impending battle. Thus, Washington sought longer terms of enlistment from Congress as well as better pay for his troops. So longer terms of enlistment means you guys gotta stay longer. So like my Korean students here, I think you guys do 18 months now for service. So he was looking to extend it. So it'd be like telling you guys, well, you got to do 3 years now. But a leery Congress, and leery means people who are not sure about something, they don't really believe it. So they're leery. Afraid of moving from one military dictatorship to another, was not easily convinced. So Washington was forced to do the best he could under the circumstances. And they were very tough circumstances. Considering the problems of troop defection, so defection means they ran away to the woods, so that was a problem. Insubordination, which means soldiers do not want to follow orders. lack of discipline, and a shortage of gunpowder. So those one-shot rifle muskets, you had to fill it every time with gunpowder. So if you had no gunpowder, it couldn't fire the rifle. It's understandable that Washington maintained order at times by flogging troops or worse. So if you don't know what flogging is, if you've ever seen a movie about old-time sailors, their punishment, at least what they show in the movies, was always flogging. So they tie the guy to the post, take off his shirt, and they hit him with that many-layered leather, kind of like a whip. I think it's called a cat of nine tails, and they flog him. So they flog people that deserted or wouldn't work or didn't want to wake up, do their duties in the army. And it said deserters and repeat offenders, so people who kept on not following orders were often hanged. So we know what that is. When Washington first took command, there was much strategic planning. On May 10, 1775, at the start of the Revolutionary War, Ethan Allen, an American Revolutionary soldier, led his Green Mountain Boys in an attack to overtake Fort Ticonderoga. These soldiers from Vermont seized or took control of the fort and all of its valuable artillery, which means all the guns, stores, without a struggle. Then they dragged 50 heavy cannons by sled from Fort Ticonderoga in northern New York to Boston. An astute Washington, and astute means very smart, an astute Washington had the cannons mounted on Dorchester Heights, which commanded the city. Okay? And it says, of course, so I'm going to stop there because that's at the bottom of my first page of questions on 48. So I'm going to have to proceed to the whiteboard. Okay, write my first couple of questions here. Let me get the capitalization correct here. Sorry about that. Okay, question 1. Who was appointed commander of the colonial forces? That's not going to be too difficult to answer, right? We just read that information. So please don't put something like Bill Clinton or President Obama. They were not around at that time. Plus, they were both not military presidents. Okay. So let me go to the second one. Okay, what were the problems of the Continental Army at that time? So again, as a service to you, my dear, lovely students, okay, especially the ones that have been with me for a while, you know, it says problems. Right here it says problems. So the answer is not only going to be one, okay? You have to give me a few. The same thing. There's a little list. So the more you give me, the more points I can give you and be fair to you. So If you only give me one, well, you won't get as many points as the person that writes down 3 problems. Okay? And again, joking aside, I don't want to see, well, there was no Big Macs, at that time. So that was not an issue. They did not have fast food at that time. Okay? So it's right there in the material. We just went over it. And here's an easy date question, right? Okay. Last question on this page. When did the Revolutionary War start? Okay, so just give me the start date. That's all. So if I can know when did the Korean War start, 1950, then you can give me the date of when the Revolutionary War started. So, okay, so give you a couple of minutes to write these down. Again, you can write your answers at your leisure, so you need to at least have these. So again, 1, who was appointed, or easy English, who was made commander of the colonial forces? That means the army. You remember at this time there was no navy. And of course there was no air force, there were no planes. 2, what were the problems of the Continental Army at the time? And I listed a few. And remember the mean penalties they had for these folks. And then 3, when did the Revolutionary War start? Was it 1950, the same year as the Korean War? Maybe. Okay, so let me go to the eraser and start erasing these things. Okay, 1, c'est la vie. 2, c'est la guerre. And 3, tout de suite. Okay, so let me go back to that interesting reading. Okay, so I left off at the bottom, of course, and then it continues on for British General William Howe saw this and fled, which means he ran away by sea to Halifax, Nova Scotia. Remember, England had a navy. We did not. Where he awaited the reinforcement of German mercenaries from Europe. This brought a much-needed reprieve from the occupation of any British troops in the colonies. So there's a couple of words there. Okay. I already went over fled. I've gone over mercenaries maybe in the other class. It's not particular to Germany, just any country. So mercenaries are soldiers or ex-soldiers that fought for their own country and now are selling their skills to fight for another country. So these were soldiers that fought for Germany and they did their time, but they want to make money from their fighting skills. So the British pay them. That's why they're mercenaries. They're not their own British troops. And then we see the little word reprieve. That means a rest. Some people still might use this. Oh, I need a reprieve from my job. It means a rest. Okay. Now we go on for battling for New York before there was a Times Square. Okay. Britain's clear advantage was its navy, like I mentioned. For the Americans had none. Sensing the final break even before the Declaration of Independence was signed in June of 1776, the British sent General Howe to assemble his forces as well as a huge fleet meaning many ships. Howe landed on Long Island, pushing his way to New York City with an army of 30,000 soldiers, more than twice as many men as Washington had. Trying to cope with this mighty force Washington committed a tactical blunder. Blunder means an error that nearly cost him the war. He split his troops between Brooklyn on the left and Long Island and Manhattan Island. This weakened the overall American position. Anytime you start dividing, instead of having a large number, it weakens a position. By the end of August, the Americans had to retreat to their Brooklyn Heights fortifications. Okay? And now we'll go on to our first fun fact. Okay, this thing doesn't want to move. There we go. Okay. During the Revolution, when General Howe and his British forces occupied New York City, they placed an enormous, which means a giant, demand on the milk and cream products coming from Long Island. Long Islanders were forced to substitute tomatoes and water broth for the cream in their chowder. Therefore, the proper name for red clam chowder would be Long Island clam chowder rather than Manhattan clam chowder as it is called. So somebody made a sales point a long time ago and changed the actual true name to Manhattan clam chowder, but it actually originated on Long Island. So like I always tell my students, the history of food is very, very interesting. You can learn things about society through food, right? Okay, so that's the fun fact. So we continue with the lecture. Thinking he had them cornered, Howe called off his redcoats, which is the British Army, temporarily while he planned a potential siege, which is a large attack, not a small one. This proved to be a mistake. Surrender was not on Washington's mind. Though he had no navy to rely on, the undeterred general, which means he was not going to be stopped, rounded up every seaworthy vessel he could find and obtained assistance from experienced boatmen of Marblehead, Massachusetts. In the midst of a raging storm and a thick fog, he and his men rowed across the East River to safety in Manhattan, losing not one man in his command. Very impressive. But although this served as a brilliant escape, it also meant, unfortunately, that an important American seaport had been lost to the British. Okay, so this brings me to the bottom of my next page, 49. So I have a couple of questions here. So again, let's head on over to the whiteboard. All right. So first question on this page is, okay, what was England's advantage in the Revolutionary War? I've gone over this at least 3 times. So I don't think I can give you any hints here. But maybe it was they had fish and chips. I don't know. Or could it have been the clam chowder? That was the advantage. Okay, so on to my, I only have 2 questions on this page. Wow, I'm getting too kind. Okay. Yeah, I get the preposition correct. Okay, my last question on this page. What mistake did George Washington make in the battle for New York? So I was going to put on, but it's for. He had two, England and the Colonials fighting for, not technically on it. So he made a mistake here, right? Tactical mistake. The only hint I'll give you is playing blackjack in Las Vegas. It's a mistake some people make. Okay, so go ahead and write down your two questions here before I erase them. But we've already gone through 2 pages, so we're skipping along quite quickly here. Maybe I should lie down and take a nap and then come back in 20 minutes. Is that okay? No? Okay. So again, what was England's advantage in the Revolutionary War? Again, was it the clam chowder? I don't think so. 5, what mistake did George Washington make in the Battle for New York? Did he double down at the MGM casino? Okay. No, but close. So back to the eraser. Shoot, that one's gone. 5 is gone. Okay, let me go back to the lecture material. Okay, so this is where we finished off. American seaport had been lost to the British. Okay. We're on to the next one. See if I follow along correctly, because I want to give you the correct questions. Okay. The war up north, right? Again, up north. All the colonies were in the northern part, northeastern part of what later became the United States. Okay. The British didn't use their time wisely, for they spent the first 6 months of 1770. Did that get chopped off? 7. Okay, so 777. On skirmishes in northern New Jersey. Okay, skirmishes are what are considered small battles, small fighting battles, whether between houses or in the forest. Not what we learned prior on the prior page about a siege, which is a big battle. Okay, so they're wasting time on small battles instead of concentrating on big ones. General John Burgoyne felt that by striking down the Hudson River, he would cut off New England and New York from the rest of the colonies and end the colonial rebellion. After recapturing, so capturing again, Fort Ticonderoga, Burgoyne headed toward Fort Edward. When the Patriots saw them approach, they scattered into the woods for cover, which means they went in all different directions, not just everybody following one fellow. And then for cover means protection behind trees, rocks, but continued to attack from behind the shield of trees. The end result was British losses of close to 1,000 men. This slowed the British down, and by the time they reached Saratoga, New York, the Americans were ready. American General Horatio Gates positioned his troops to overlook the road to Albany so that when Burgoyne came along, he pretty much had to fight. After losing even more soldiers, Burgoyne did what he swore he'd never do. He surrendered on October 17th. And there's a year again, 1777. So to let you know something, make it more clear for you about the colonial forces scattered into the woods, and they continue to attack. And then you're going to ask yourself, well, then how the hell did the British lose close to 1,000 men? If you ever can see the movie Last of the Mohicans, which was made sometime in the 1990s, it shows how the British fought at this time with the redcoats. They basically stood in one straight line and marched straight ahead. So when you have an enemy that suddenly hides behind rocks and trees and starts shooting at you, it's very easy to hit you when you're standing in a straight line with bright red uniform. So that's why they just kind of stood their ground and couldn't hit back the hiding colonists, and lost a lot of men that way. Very bad military strategy. So if you can see Last of the Mohicans, you will see how they were easily attacked by many different kinds of people. American Native Indians also. Okay. So now we're on to Valley Forge. Okay. Though Saratoga had turned the war in America's favor, the Battle of Saratoga, Washington still had his struggles or problems. Trying to protect the capital of Philadelphia, he lost battles of Brandywine and Germantown, and he withdrew his besieged forces to nearby Valley Forge, the site of his winter encampment. Okay, so just a few issues there. City of Brandywine, they made a lot of brandy, so that's why they named it Brandywine. You say Germantown, wait a minute. Okay, so just to let you know, a lot of Germans came over in those early years, and there were so many Germans by the time that Washington, took over, and this actually became the United States, that they had to vote for language between English and German, and English barely won at the time. So if there had been a couple more Germans and Germans had won, the United States would have been a German-speaking country. So that's a very interesting fact. And then he withdrew his besieged forces. When you're besieged, that's another word for overwhelmed, or you just have too many problems. So they were being attacked on so many sides. The British soldiers did not know what to do, right? Okay. Continuing. On the positive side, 11,000 soldiers who spent the winter of 1777 through 1778 here were positioned high enough to have a grand view of anyone approaching, including General Howe. So again, that's why you hear the military term. The best strategy is to seek high ground. Because why? As it says here, position high enough, they had a view of anyone approaching. So again, that's another technique for easily killing a lot of people that kind of just walk into your trap. However, the conditions at Valley Forge were dismal, and dismal means worse than bad, worse than terrible. It's just dismal. Maybe bad conditions are, I don't know, you only have rice to eat, and then terrible conditions are you only have crackers to eat, and then dismal situation is you only have crumbs, okay? Something like that to make it more visual. An estimated 2,500 troops, meaning soldiers, died from exposure or disease. So exposure means more or less here freezing to death. So a lot of soldiers would be okay in the nighttime, and then in the morning, the guy would be frozen, right? And then disease, because there wasn't a lot of cleanliness going on there, and they didn't have good medicines or good doctors. So if a guy got shot in the leg and started getting infected, they just immediately cut it off, before the gangrene spread. It was not a good time. Further reducing Washington's fighting force. So he also started losing a lot of troops, but for different reasons than the British. The men needed everything from food and soap, right? Because they need to get clean, to blankets and warm clothing. And when you're in a freezing area and you have no blankets or warm clothing, you better watch out. If you've seen any documentaries about World War II where Germany invaded Russia and they're fighting all through the spring and summer, and then it gets to be winter, they show a lot of German soldiers just frozen, just completely. They weren't even shot or killed, they just froze. And that's exposure. Many deserted the Continental Army, again, back to deserting, leaving. Making matters worse, discontented or unhappy officers tried to oust Washington. Oust means to get rid of him, and replace him with General Horatio Gates. When this attempt failed, it ended up doing more to solidify or make strong Washington's influence than break it. So the result was the reverse of what they wanted. It just made more people admire him. They forgot about changing him for General Horatio Gates. Okay. There's a little bit more I have to read, and then I'll connect the questions. So let me see, to make sure I do this right. Okay, I'll have to read. The commander refused to take more comfortable quarters until his men were provided for. With the few tools they had, the troops erected shelters of logs and clay. So erected means built and stood up, and shelter is a place, any type of place that protects you. People now say, I have a home, so I have shelter. So they made a shelter of logs, tree logs, and then clay. Clay is wet earth. Thanks to Washington's leadership and the efforts of drill master Baron Augustus von Steuben, which is a German name, and he was Prussian, which is a German property. A Prussian officer who volunteered for the American cause. They restored discipline, morale, and training at Valley Forge that winter. So at the bottom of that page, I shall stop. And I have questions for this long page. So let me go to the whiteboard. Okay. Okay. Wow. Let's want to do a capital. Okay. Okay. First question on this page. How many soldiers did the British lose in the battle for New York? So just give me a number. A lot of students love these number questions. They don't have to write a sentence or 2 sentences. They just put the number there. So if you think only one British soldier died in the Battle of New York, maybe you're correct, right? Or maybe 2. You know, one was an old guy, he got tired, right? So give your best shot there. Okay, next one. Okay, here's an easy one. How did this battle end? Okay, meaning basically who won this battle? Was it the Colonial, or did they lose this one and win a different one and the English won? So see if you can remember who won this battle. Okay. It's like who won the Korean War? You know who won the Korean War? It was called a truce. Nobody won. Okay. Now we'll move on to a different area. Okay. Describe the conditions of Valley Forge. So we've gone from the Battle of New York to Valley Forge. So describe the conditions. So again, you see the plural noun, not the singular noun of condition, but conditions. So again, the more you give me, the more points I can give you. So were the conditions exciting? Was there a health spa at Valley Forge? Was there a resort with surfing and a free open bar? Please let me know what the conditions were. And I'm seeing, do I have another question on this page or not? Yes, I do. Sorry. The last one was only 2, so I got to give you more on this one. Okay. Or wait a minute. Skipping over. Okay, so I guess I'm going to do a short version on the other page. So I shall wait on that one. So go ahead and finish these 3, please. Give you a few minutes there. Write them down. And we're skipping along quite well. But don't forget you have a midterm. So again, office shall send that to you, right? Yeah, so again, question 6. How many soldiers did the British lose in the battle for New York? So again, probably Temujin's going to say, maybe 1, 1.5. Well, 1.5, was it the bottom half or the top half? Okay, 7, how did this battle end? Basically, who won? Did Mongolia win this battle? And then Temujin went back home and collected his salary? And 8, describe the conditions of Valley Forge. Again, it was snowing. Maybe they had a ski resort over there at Valley Forge. You never know. So, okay, let me erase these. Okay, where's that eraser? Bad. Okay, so 6, we say goodbye. 7, 8. Okay, let me go back to the reading. Okay, and I got to do this right because I will have one question in a short area. Okay, so let me see. Together. Okay, I know where I'm at. So, all right. Again, repeating the commander, meaning Georgie Washington, or Washington, refused to take more comfortable quarters or comfortable, uh, you know, room, bed, until his men were provided for or taken care of. Again, with the few tools they had, the troops erected shelters of logs and clay, thanks to Washington's leadership and the efforts of Brewmaster Baron Augustus von Steuben, a Prussian officer who volunteered for the American cause. They restored discipline, morale. Morale is the positive feeling that the soldiers have. If you're in a war and you're constantly losing, the soldiers will lose morale or the desire to fight, right? So they have to restore the morale, make them positive. And training at Valley Forge that winter. Spring's approach brought brighter spirits. Okay, it doesn't mean it brought bright ghosts or multicolored alcohol. It means that people felt more positive when the snow started melting away and they had spring. As did the heartening news, again, your heart feels happy, that France had allied itself with the Americans. So now the soldiers knew that France would be sending assistance, soldiers, and high-level French command to help them against the British. So if you don't know your European history, Britain and France had been fighting for centuries. They always seemed to dislike each other, right? So I think the French called the British limeys, and the British called the French frogs. You can figure that out the best you can. I'm an American, I don't know. Within 6 months, the Continental Army was ready once more. The last major battle in the Northeast occurred at Monmouth in June 1778, when the British General Sir Henry Clinton, could he be related to Bill Clinton? Who took over as Commander-in-Chief after Howe retired. So Clinton took over for Howe. How did that happen? And pulled troops out of Philadelphia and moved them north toward New York. Washington's army caught up with them at Monmouth, New Jersey, where General Washington ordered his second in command, Charles Lee. You think maybe he was Chinese, related to Bruce Lee? No, there's actually English people with the last name Lee. So not only do Chinese people have the last name Lee. To attack the rear of the British forces. A good strategy. You have a big army in the front, and your enemies don't realize that your smaller army is circling around the back to attack them at the back and catch them by surprise. Lee, disliking Washington's plan, fought half-heartedly and ordered a retreat. So when you do anything, let alone fight half-heartedly, you don't put 100% effort into what you're doing. So some people say things like, like I said, it could cover various areas. How come you lost your job? And the guy says, well, I only really half-heartedly tried at my job. So they realized I wasn't a good worker and they fired me. So here, I guess, the guy only shot when he needed to and didn't try to defend as hard. And then he retreated. So not what George Washington wanted or needed. It's kind of like on simple terms, you have a buddy that's going to help you fight a couple of guys, and maybe he throws a few punches and then runs away, and then you're by yourself. So that's basically it on a basic level. This infuriated General Washington. So infuriated is worse than getting angry. It is, you're really, I guess you would say, pissed off. That's the slang term. So there's a person who say, yeah, I was mad at him, but I got over it. But when they say infuriated, it means almost like you want to shoot the person yourself. So I'm sure George Washington wanted to do that, because by him retreating, more of Washington's men in the front were killed, right? So that's a lot worse than just being angry. He rallied the troops to follow his command, and Clinton's army fell back some before withdrawing or returning to New York, right? So he rallied the troops, he lifted their morale and said, hey, Lee took off. He's not helping us, but we can do it on our own. We don't need that joker, Lee. I'll deal with him later. Washington had once again restored sagging morale. So I've gone over morale. So sagging means that it was going down. So if you've ever heard the term sagging, it's almost like you get a bag of something and then it gets wet and it makes it more heavy than what it was. So the bag really starts getting heavy and pushing out towards the bottom. So I guess they wanted to give up the troops once they saw Lee retreat, but he restored it, brought them back. I don't know what he did exactly. And they fought for him. And Lee, while trying to clear his name of wrongdoing, so Lee's trying to say, I'm innocent, I was a good guy, I don't know what you're talking about, was court-martialed and suspended from command. Court-martialed is the army. It's the army court. That's where they try you in court in the army. So if you do something bad in the army, you won't go to the regular court of, California or the Supreme Court. You're dealt with by army rules. So he was court-martialed and then suspended from his command, right? So no more being a general. When he refused to accept this, so he refused to accept his decision, he was removed from the Continental Army altogether. So what that means is he was court-martialed and suspended. So maybe they said, hey, in 6 months, we'll give you another chance. But he just said, hell no, I don't accept any of this. So then they said, you're out of the army altogether. Just go play in the woods. So that's what happened. So this brings me to my one little question that was in this part. So let me go back to the whiteboard. Okay, for that one little juicy question. Hopefully you paid attention to this. My question is going to be longer than your answer. Okay. Again, I'm being kind. Okay. How long did it take the Continental Army to get ready? Remember, they had a lot of problems, sagging morale, lack of discipline, many things. So they needed some time for Washington to get these guys into shape and get them ready to fight again. So long question, short answer. It's a certain amount of time. Was it only 2 hours and they got happy, or did it take a little longer than that to get them ready to continue fighting the British? Okay, so go ahead. I'll give you a minute or two on that. Okay, like I said, hopefully everybody's hanging in there. Okay. All right. So again, how long did it take the Continental Army to get ready, or how long did it take Washington to get them ready? Okay, so that's that little question for the short reading area. Let me erase that. Eraser. Adios. Okay, so let me go back. Okay, so we're now off to the Battle of Yorktown. And let me make sure I'm on the correct area because I don't want you to miss any of the questions. So again, we've answered 53 now. Back here at 52. All right. So Battle of Yorktown, a big one they talk about in the history books. So you shall learn about it also. Okay. All right. So the Revolutionary War had raged, which means had gone on, but at a violent pace, right? So rage. You can give that for people too. I'll give you a good example. A person can get angry and raise their voice, yell or scream, and you can say they're angry. They're very angry. But when a person gets into a rage, then their anger is uncontrollable. And maybe they will break a table or start punching people or, tearing down a wall. I'll give you a funny example. I don't know, everybody's quite young, but if you remember who Elvis Presley was, he had a very violent temper. And again, who knows if later drugs were involved with that, but his bodyguard said they knew he would go in a rage because usually what he did when he was in a rage is he would watch something on TV and not like what they said about him or some other person that he liked, and he would pull out his gun and just shoot the TV screen. So that's an uncontrolled rage. So this Revolutionary War was just very, very violent and very, very bloody at this time. So the Revolutionary War had raged for 6 years when in the summer of 1781, the second French fleet arrived. Again, fleet is a massive number of ships. So more French coming to assist the Colonials. Washington had sent General Lafayette. So again, my Korean students, if you live in Koreatown, we have Lafayette Park there. That's who this is named after, the park, General Lafayette. To confront Cornwallis, the famous British General Cornwallis, near the Chesapeake Bay. And if you ever get any Pepperidge Farm cookies, I know a lot of people love Milanos, but I like the Chesapeake Bay cookies with the fudge. Those are good. So you wonder where do these American products get all these strange names from? Now you're learning. There, the British were awaiting supplies from New York. So I guess that answers one of the prior questions that might come on the final. Who won the Battle of New York? Well, who was waiting for supplies there, right? Just a free point for you. But upon hearing of the French fleet, Washington changed plans, leaving New York himself and heading south. So he stopped fighting there and started heading south. Why did he change his plan? Very interesting. Washington coordinated or put together the plan, which consisted of the land and sea operation that brought the final climax of the war. It was as if, excuse me, the commander had been waiting for this very moment to unleash his most brilliant strategies and fighting energy. So it's kind of like saying he was saving, as we say in the United States, he was saving his best for the last. So British generals thought he was only so good. Now they realized, oh my God, he's even better of a commander than we thought. Okay. Let me see, did I miss any words here? No. Okay, so again, brilliant means very intelligent, very exciting strategies and fighting energy. If you don't know what a strategy is, and the word strategy comes from military words, it is your plan. So here would be a battle plan. Again, things like I mentioned before, get the high ground, scatter and hide behind trees and shoot the British who are standing in a straight line, right? And then of course fighting energy, because somehow he was able to be a role model to his soldiers, and it gave them energy and wanting to fight, right? Okay, so we're at the bottom of that page. So I have a couple of questions there. So let me proceed to those. Back to the old whiteboard. Again, hopefully everybody's hanging in. Okay, question 10. When did the French forces arrive in the colonies? Okay. Right, I think we just answered that question. So the key word is look for the word, should I give you a hint? Look for the word fleet. Okay. So here you're just supplying me a date. That's all. I've written the long question and you just give me the number. And we're okay. All right. All right, I have one more question for this short page. Not 3, only 2. Okay. Okay. What did this bring for the war? A little drink of water there, a little dry. Okay, sometimes I get smarty pants students here. And then like if this was on the test, they'll say, hey, teacher didn't tell me what war. I have no idea. Maybe he's talking about Korean War. I don't know. Okay. I have not left the subject of the American Revolutionary War. I have not changed anything. Okay. So in the other questions, I kept on saying Revolutionary War, Revolutionary War. So now I have the option just to say the war because we definitely know what we're talking about. So no tricks or my Chinese students. Is this when Mao was fighting the Kuomintang? No, I'm not talking about that. So what did this bring for the war? What does that mean? Did they bring cookies? Right? No, what happened? Right? The French arrived and then what happened? What did this do? Right? That's what I'm asking for there. Okay, so for all my funny guys, right? Okay, so take a few minutes to write those down. And then we'll be okay. So, and don't worry about the midterm. It's easy peasy. More or less 90-something% of the same questions I gave you before. Oops, Yes, maybe I asked a question that is a little different, but it's the easy stuff from the reading. So who knows? Or no, maybe I'm tricking you. No, you guys know me by now. So again, let me erase these. So 10, when did the French forces arrive in the colonies? Maybe 1977 when disco hit. Okay, and 11, what did this bring for the war? It brought French bread and coffee. Okay. All right, let me go back. We have very little reading left. Let me get back to it. Okay, so we ended at the bottom of fighting energy. And yes, so let me proceed. And this will be the last reading for today. Yay, everybody gets excited. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. So at the top of the page, now again, let me make sure I mark down. I don't want to give you the questions twice. Trying to be very thoughtful here. First, the French, what is French? French. Wow, maybe I need more water. The French fleet blockaded Yorktown early that September, followed by a combined Franco-American army that Washington commanded. Okay, there's a couple of things there, heebie-jeebie. Okay. When you put ships that block a marina or a seaport like San Francisco, let's say, that is called blockaded. Okay. And then combined with a Franco-American. Now I know we have some canned Franco-American spaghetti, but that's something different. Franco meaning French and American, that's the term they use. They can't say France-American, right? So they called it Franco-American Army that Washington commanded. So he had soldiers from the colonies and France. And we needed their help, definitely. Nothing wrong about saying that. It took up siege positions on land, and by early October, had trapped the British against the York River. Trapped, cannot escape. In gross misjudgment. Okay, here's another strange term, I bet, for you. When you do something, I mean, as an adjective, gross means something like very ugly, like bloody, or the police shot him and his intestines flew out in the street. That's gross. But here, gross means like a wide or large, and then misjudgment is when you make a mistake. So a large mistake, basically. But again, this is a writer writing a book, so they want to use fancy words. Cornwallis had his back to the sea, so that was a bad military strategy. He didn't think about that at the time. Daily he endured gunfire and continual pounding from the cannons until he was forced to ask the Americans for terms of surrender on October 17th, 1781. So endured means put up with for a long time, gunfire, and then continual pounding. So when the cannonballs land and are crushing your buildings or ships or what have you, that is called a pounding. So it forced him to ask the Americans for terms of surrender. So you just don't surrender, but you ask permission. Like, how do you want us to surrender? What do you need from us for this surrender? 2 days later, the once mighty and haughty, okay, if anybody's a Christian and goes to church, they talk about people being haughty in church. Young guys, don't get that confused with Hottie, which is what you guys call sexy young ladies. Oh, she's a hottie, a different pronunciation. Haughty here means people who are, if you know the slang term, stuck up, too much ego, too much pride. So yes, at the beginning of the war, they were mighty or stronger. So they had a large ego and thought they would easily get rid of these, colonial militias. Right? So the once mighty and haughty British Army paraded its units, which means they marched in a parade, between the victorious French and American soldiers, laying down their arms. So that doesn't mean they lied down and went to sleep. Laying down their arms means they put down all their guns, all their muskets or rifles. They lied them on the ground to show that they had no weapons with which to attack. This is a form of surrender, one of the terms, I guess, that Washington asked for. And this was while a British band played the popular tune, "The World Turned Upside Down." So that means, and emphatically states the fact that they could not believe that they actually lost, right? So, continuing, unable to concede the war, which means they could not, Cornwallis could not accept the outcome. He sent a representative, General O'Hara. So again, I know some Japanese people have the last name O'Hara, but I think this comes from Ireland. So this is not a Japanese general. General O'Hara, but here we would pronounce it O'Hara, right? To surrender his sword. So again, Cornwallis had so much ego, he refused to concede or come and surrender his sword. So he had his representative, General O'Hara. You're lower than me. You go surrender your sword. I'm not going to do it, right? And again, this was repeated when Japan surrendered to the United States. The high-level command had to surrender their katana or swords. General O'Hara approached a French commander who indicated or said that the sword should go to General Washington because he was the commander of the Colonial Army. However, Washington felt that an officer of equal rank should receive it. This is quite different. Washington didn't have any ego and wanted to give respect to another officer. Thus, meaning so, his second in command, Major General Benjamin Lincoln, wow, not Benjamin Franklin or Abraham Lincoln, but Benjamin Lincoln, received the British sword in surrender. I haven't been to Philly, but I wonder that sword is probably in a museum in Philadelphia. Something to see. Back in England, King George III was prepared to fight on. But the British Parliament is their form of government, like the Congress, and put an end to that notion. So what that means there is, like a lot of people who are kings or dictators, their soldiers get wiped out, but since they're so far away from the fighting, they cannot accept that they've lost. So they're like, no, we're going to continue. We're going to do it. But luckily for the British people, the Parliament said, that's it. We've lost. We're not going to do this anymore, right? And as you can see here, it said it had taken more than 6 years of war and skirmishes, which are small battles before that, to drive its greatest overseas possession, which the colonies were England's greatest possession, toward independence. In February 1782, Lord North's ministry in Britain fell. Parliament would no longer support a war in America. So again, the Parliament has a check and balance like we have here. A lot of people want to say, which is not correct. You might not like him, but it's not correct. President Trump is like a dictator, like Kim Jong-un. So, but that's not the case. We have a check and balance system here. Kim Jong-un, if he decides, hey, I want to attack Japan, there's no one to stop him. He can declare it and it can happen, and he will make it happen. United States, President Trump can say, I don't know, I want to attack Russia, but Congress can stop him. They have the final say so, and it will not happen without the Congress saying it's okay. So we got that from the British Parliament. King George III wanted to continue, but Parliament said, we've lost enough men, we've lost enough money, we don't want to continue to do that. So King George III, take a chill pill, just to chillax, and that's not going to happen. We will not support a war in America. Okay. So that's it for the reading today. So like I said, I have sent a test, the midterm, to the office, and they shall send you the midterms. You'll be getting it from them. And then when you've finished it, hopefully you will not take the whole week. You will have some honor system, and you will send it back to me at my email, right? Like you normally send your lessons. And then I will grade the midterm for you. And that being said, all that material that we did the review questions last week, once the midterm is done, that's it. You don't have to remember it. It's not going to show up on the final. But today's lesson is the first of the next few lessons of the information that will show up on the final. So, I mean, if you want, after the midterm, you want to forget that information from your life, go ahead. I hope you would remember some things. I hope I made some things very easy for you to remember so that you could feel proud if you have to talk to an American person and they somehow forgot, who was George Washington, who? And then you can embarrass them and say, hey, I'm not from the United States, but I know some early American history knowledge, right? That's my goal with you, my dear students. So I'm going to end it up a little early today because you do have a final to take. And good luck on that. It should not be difficult, little time consuming, but it should not be difficult. So thanks for listening in. Stay cool. It's been hot lately. And then I'll see you next week. Okay? Thank you.